Welcome to the GRESB Inside ESG 2024 Assessment Q&A session. My name is Mathilde Petria. I am the Chief Customer Success Officer here at GRESB. Together with our team, our role is to make sure your GRESB journey is successful. We hope you will find very valuable insights during this webinar. I want to start by saying that you can ask us questions at any time in the chats in the bar below your screen. We have a team here to answer you live, and in case we are not able to answer your questions, we'll make sure to get back to you as soon as possible. Let's go into the agenda of this session. First of all, I'm going to give you some information about the timeline of the assessment this year. Then my colleagues are going to give you information about the 2024 changes, some important tips and tricks, and last but not least, the Q&A session. Let's start about the assessment timeline. As you know, GRESB is cyclical. In Q1, we focused on preparing the very important resources materials for you. I really encourage you to read the reference guides and the scoring documents if you have not done so already. Then between April and June, that's obviously the very important reporting period. In the summer, we focus on validation. In September, you get your preliminary results, and in October, we get the final results out, followed by an exciting result season. Let's dive a bit more into the timeline here. I want to start by highlighting that you can already log into the portal and edit anything about your entity, add users. You can also already now download the pre-filled 2024 asset spreadsheet for real estate and make any changes in terms of asset data in the asset portal. The portal obviously opens on April 1st and you can report up until July 1st. I want to highlight here that the service known formally as the response check, which is now the pre-submission check, is available for requests between April 1st and June 1st. This service will be executed between May 1st and June 21st. I really encourage you to book those services as early as possible as we have a limited amount of slots available. And also, I would encourage you to execute it as early as possible in your process to make sure you have enough time to update any responses you might need to update following the service before July 1st. Also very important to remember that between August 1st and August 15th, you have the ability to customize your peer group in the portal for real estate only. I would really encourage you to note this date in your agenda and remember to do so. 2nd of September, we launch the preliminary results, and then you have the availability to perform an assessment correction if you need to, between 2nd of September and 15th of September. Then obviously the very exciting moment is October 1st, when we release the final results. I also want to tell you here that you are very welcome to book a result consultation service with our team that can happen from mid-October onwards, and here we can help you understand your results and also dig into the validation decisions. I also want to take the opportunity today to share some exciting news. We have been working over the past months in developing the GRESB Accredited Professional Exam that we call the GRESB AP. This new credential is real estate only for now, and it aims to really recognize the professionals who have the skill to establish the strategy, manage the reporting, and the analysis around the GRESB assessment. The audience for this AP are real estate professionals, but also sustainability experts who might already be LEED, WELL, or BREEAM APs, but also partners of GRESB and solution providers. Learn more very soon. Stay tuned by looking at our website. You can also contact your account manager for more details. I will finish this section by telling you that you can contact us at any time should you have any question or need any assistance. The GRESB Member Success Team is here for you. You can contact us by filling the form on our website or by sending us an email at info@gresb.com. If you have a question that is more on the commercial side, then you are very welcome to contact the GRESB Member Relations Team and your account manager. Thank you very much for your attention, and now over to my colleagues who will give you more information about the 2024 changes in the assessment.
Thank you very much, Mathilde. Hello, everyone. My name is Daniel Aderi, and I am a senior analyst within the infrastructure product team at GRESB. Today, I will be walking you through the 2024 infrastructure changes across, the different assessments that comprise the infrastructure business line at GRESB. We have the asset assessment, we have the fund assessment, and we have finally the new development asset assessment, which actually makes up for the main change, I would say, for the year ahead. As a reminder, the changes can be found as well online, as they have already been published in October 2023 at GRESB.com. Now, before we deep dive into the specific changes, I just wanted to give a summary, really, of the changes and what they entail and what they actually affect. So, to begin, what the changes affect are the performance indicators across the asset assessment, specifically targeting a GH1, as GRESB has really focused a lot on greenhouse gases as of the past year. Then the changes will also affect the management indicators of both the asset and fund assessment, where these indicators are shared and are common, and some asset-specific management indicators. And finally, we have, as I mentioned before, the introduction of a new development asset assessment, which is basically the main change really for 2024. Now, starting with the first change for the asset assessment, in the performance component of the asset assessment, we have as I mentioned before, the GH1 indicator. Here we are introducing the data coverage for GHG individual scopes 1, 2, and 3, whereby participants will now be required to report coverage levels across these 3 data points. And they will choose among the drop-down list as shown in the right-hand side of the slides, among full data coverage, partial data coverage, more than 50%, partial less than 50%, and no coverage at all. Now, alongside this change, we are also introducing the ability for, and we're actually requiring participants to report as well whether these data points are being checked, verified, or assured, or none of the above. Therefore, participants will be required, alongside reporting the data coverage for scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions, also whether these emissions, whether the data points being submitted to GRESB are being verified in a certain way. And participants will be able to select as well the verification scheme, the scheme name that they're using to do so. Now, to continue with the GH1 changes, we also have an extra change whereby participants will now need to choose between location-based and market-based methodology for their scope 2 emissions. And therefore, what this means is that the option of mixed location-based and market-based is being removed from the standards and the assessment. The reason for that, again, removing this option will increase the quality and consistency and comparability really of the data provided, as a mixed approach does not have really a standardized methodology or a set approach for participants to follow, and therefore this really decreases comparability for the different data points across assets. And finally, last change for GH1 is that participants will be able to now report, obviously optionally, how they have determined their scope 3 emissions in an open text box. And this change basically will provide transparency to investors on how the participants conduct their scope 3 materiality assessments, and hopefully will give and it will allow GRESB to review these answers in the future to begin to understand really how best practice looks like when it comes to reporting scope 3 emissions across different assets. Now, continuing the list of changes within the performance component of the asset assessment, we have the intensity values that we used to show for the EN1, WT1, WT2, WS1 and BI1 indicators, which will now actually be omitted if participants do not report full coverage for these indicators. Just to remind you, the EN1 indicator is the energy indicator, the WT1 and WT2 indicators are the water indicators. WS1 stands for waste management, and finally the BI1 indicator stands for the biodiversity indicator. Therefore, how do participants basically not report or report full coverage level here in these indicators? Well, as shown in the right-hand side of the slides, if participants select no to the exceptions section under each of these indicators, that would imply that the participant has submitted data that does not relate to all the facilities of the asset, and therefore we're going to omit the intensity values. The reason we are omitting intensity values is because these values were provided in the benchmark reports even when participants would state that the performance data would not cover all of the entity's facilities, and providing intensities with incomplete data coverage reduces greatly data quality but also accuracy, and that was highlighted to be misleading, especially for investors. Now, continuing with the last change of the performance component of the asset assessment, this relates to the EM1 indicator, the employees indicator. Here, participants will no longer be able or be required to report on the amount, the average amount spent for FTE on training and development. And similarly, they will also no longer be required to report on whether ESG training tackles the E, S, or G pillar of ESG. And this is in an attempt to try to reduce reporting burden for participants within this indicator. However, participants will need to indicate that 100% of employees receive both general and ESG training to receive full points, meaning that therefore the score, the points allocation for this indicator, for this specific section of the indicator, is strictly related to the coverage level, let's say, of or the percentage of employees that receive general and ESG training. And finally, participants who will have checked the Net Promoter Score option as a quantitative metric for the employee satisfaction survey will need to also report the score received of the Net Promoter. Now, moving on to the changes that affect the management indicators that are shared across the infrastructure, asset, and fund assessment, let's focus first on the leadership section. Here we have LE5 and LE4 for the asset and fund assessment, which is the ESG, climate-related, and DEI senior decision maker. For the first time, GRESB will start to score as well whether the entity has a decision maker for climate-related risks and opportunities. This has been noted by the GRESB Foundation as one of the most important ESG issues, and therefore it should be as important as other topic-specific related objectives in the standards, such as DEI. Finally, when looking at indicator LE6 and LE5 for the asset and fund respectively, or rather the personnel ESG performance targets indicator, here participants are no longer required to provide non-financial consequences tied to the ESG targets of their various ESG personnel that they have selected. This is because the concept of a non-financial consequence is deemed to lack strictness and can be subject to interpretation, and often, more than often, actually confuses participants and has done so in the past. So again, with this removal, we hope to decrease a bit as well the reporting burden of participants with respect to this specific question. Now, moving on to, again, still within the changes that affect both the asset and fund assessments, but looking at the climate-related risk management section. Well, here we have a couple of changes actually, and they mostly relate to the introduction really of climate-related opportunities into this section. So if we have a look at RM3 and RM2 for the asset and fund respectively, so the resilience of strategy to climate-related risks and opportunities indicator, here we've added, as the title suggests, the opportunities part, and we've also added new physical and transition scenario options to the list that include shared socio-economic pathways. And this indicator as well will now be scored. as in 2023 it was not scored. For what concerns the physical and transition risk indicators, so RM 4.1 to RM 4.4 for asset and RM 3.1 and RM 3.4 for funds, we are going to also score, or better said, we are going to manually validate the evidence that is being submitted for these indicators, meaning that score will be affected by the validation outcome of the evidence provided. And finally, the last change to these indicators surrounds the introduction of new indicators that look specifically at climate-related opportunities, identification and impact assessment. This is again across both the asset and the fund assessment. These therefore are new indicators, and they will be as well scored, and just like the transition and physical risk indicators, they will also be now subject to validation. Now moving on to more specific asset management indicators, we have LE3, whereby the ESG objectives indicator, whereby the option general sustainability is now being removed. RM1, the management systems indicator. Here we've noticed that one of the management system options that we were giving participants the option to choose is now outdated, and we are updating it. We're basically substituting OH SAS 18001 with the ISO 45001, as that has superseded the former. For the environmental, social, and governance risk assessments indicator, RM 2.1, 2.2, and 2.3, instead, an option has been added for those participants that evaluate their risks but do not treat them yet, as it has been pointed out to us that this option was lacking from the existing list. And finally, for the SE2 indicator, the supply chain engagement program, we are substituting the current list of stakeholders options that participants can select, among which the engagement engagement program focuses on, as we are creating a neater separation of tier 1 and beyond tier 1 contractors and suppliers. Now, finally, last but not least, the main change for the 2024 infrastructure changes is obviously the introduction of an entirely new assessment, a new standard for infrastructure development assets. As we've taken on board member feedback throughout the past few years and recognized that indeed there was a lack of a standard and an assessment that could cater for specifically pre-operational assets. Now, with the introduction of the new development asset assessment, we are responding to that feedback. So let's look a bit at the development asset assessment. The development asset assessment looks at pre-operational assets, as mentioned before, and it does so by considering also the different stages of development in which a project might sit in. To do so, it therefore has a different approach to materiality, as apart from carrying across the ESG issue materiality that we already have in the asset assessment, it also introduces a new concept of phase materiality, whereby an asset can be both, or can be either in pre-construction or in its construction stage. And therefore, depending at which stage the asset sits in, some indicators will be material and some others will not. And as a result of this, we then redistribute the scoring weights across all indicators to keep the assessment fair for everybody via what we call dynamic materiality. Now, despite this change, nevertheless, many aspects of the development asset assessment mirror those of the asset assessment, as we're still looking at the same efforts required from infrastructure assets in adopting an ESG strategy, thought leadership, policies, engagement, and collection of health and safety and employees' data, irrespective of being in development or already operational. However, a different approach has been taken with respect to some aspects that need to be contextually nuanced for development projects. For example, when it comes to assessments, to risk assessments, we have split these indicators between design-related and design-related risk assessment and construction-related risk assessments. As a project at its design phase will need to evaluate risks in a life cycle-oriented way. Contrarily, when a project is already in its physical development and therefore it's already being built, other risks may appear that require a different treatment and different lenses to be looked at. And hence why we're making this distinction and allowing participants in the different phases to report both types of risks. We have also taken a different approach for what concerns greenhouse gas emissions. Here, we focus mostly on forward-looking information, contrarily to what we do in the normal asset assessment, as we're looking at net zero target setting, life cycle carbon emission assessment, and an embodied carbon assessment as well. These being all data points that are particularly critical and important for investors with respect to new infrastructure that is being built from scratch. Then we also have completely new topics that have been added to these assessments, such as materials consideration for when in construction, site selection requirements, and a focus on contractors' data, such as ESG training of contractors. This information is fairly similar to the employees' data we ask also in the asset assessment. However, again, it focuses on contractors due to the importance of the contractors' workforce to build new infrastructure and the ESG training that they therefore might require. Overall, therefore, the approach that we have taken allow assets to take the development asset assessment and have a smooth transition towards the asset assessment once operational, as the management type of information that we're asking here remains relatively stable and aligned, while in the asset assessment we require more operational performance data. And development assets at the same time have an assessment that caters for their different phase of development in which they sit, allowing them to reflect their true ESG performance. Now, finally, I just wanted to quickly show how then these fits and sits in the infrastructure offering, and how does these potentially change scoring for funds? Well, essentially nothing changes except that those funds that want to have a development score now can have one. Why? Because from a fund perspective, funds will take the fund assessment and connect to their underlying assets, which will now be able to choose between the two assessments, which one to take depending on their characteristics. And the fund, therefore, will be able as well to list their underlying assets in development, and will now be able to have a separate GRESB development score apart from the traditional GRESB score that is instead based on assets that take the asset assessment. This is still dependent on meeting a 25% threshold of the portfolio reporting to GRESB in GAV terms. And we're also keeping the exclusion reasons available for funds who might not want their development assets to feed into their score and give them a new development score for whatever this reason. Well, that was it, and thank you very much. I now hand over the word to Jenny for some tips and tricks during the reporting period. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, my name is Jenny Wong, an analyst here at GRESB within the member success team. And today I would like to walk you through some tips and tricks that might be extremely helpful for your upcoming reporting period. To start with, we would like to share that all the information and resources that are related to the 2024 assessment are now available online. So if you can just click on the Insight button on the website header and then to resources, you'll be directed to the page we're showing here down below. Among all the resources provided by us, I would like to highlight the following two, which can serve as a very good starting point for you to better understand our assessment. So the first one will be the standard and reference guide. We first introduce you to the structure of our assessment, how scoring works in general, what kind of services are being provided around the assessment cycle, as well as with some explanation on the key terminology. Then we list out all the indicators one by one, followed by indicator-specific requirement, where you can get an idea on what kind of evidence we're generally looking for. The second one will be the scoring document, where we also list out all the indicators, but with a specific focus on scoring. What is mentioned in this document is that whether certain indicators are being scored or not, if they're being scored, then what scoring weight we've assigned to those indicators, and how scoring is being distributed within those indicators. Well, of course, we also provide other resources to help you better understand our assessment. For example, the aggregation rules handbooks, where you can take a look at the methodology in details on how we aggregate asset level data to the portfolio level. So please make sure that you check out all the relevant resources that might be useful to your reporting. Now, let's get ready for the start of our assessment. Our reporting period is going to be open from 1st of April. So starting 1st of April, our assessment portal will be made available for all the participants within our universe, where you can already start filling out your assessment response. If you'd like to request a pre-submission check, you will also be able to do so starting 1st of April. Our pre-submission check is previously known as the response check, which is a high-level check of your assessment response prior to the final submission. It not only helps you to reduce errors that may adversely impact your assessment results, but to also ensure that your submission is as complete as possible. It features a very careful review of your assessment response, followed by a 1-hour discussion call. And after the call, you will also receive a report highlighting all the issues that have been found. If you have any question about this service, feel free to reach out to us. What might also be helpful in ensuring a smooth reporting process is to manage your entity's users' rights properly. Please note that there are different levels of access rights, and only the account manager of the entity are able to manage that and even to submit the final response at the very end. So please don't forget to assign and manage access rights accordingly. If you're interested, you can also contact some of our partners for further assistance with the reporting process or other technical issues. Our partners include leading consultants, solution providers, and industry bodies across the globe and lead the ESG progress in real assets. You may use the dictionary on our public website to find the right partner for your needs. As you may notice, our assessment is structured in different components, and each component is divided into aspects. Each aspect also comprises of individually scored indicators. So while some of the indicators are not scored and do not require evidence at all, some are even subject to manual validation. This is why we would like to also introduce you a little bit about our evidence requirement. For indicators that are subject to manual validation, our validator reviews all the evidence documents that are being uploaded. If the evidence is not fully accepted, then a second validator will be involved and also review that piece of evidence. This also happens where we simply have a second validator to review some fully accepted documents just for the quality control purposes. Should there be any uncertainty, our validators will give benefits of doubt for once, but there's no guarantee that it will be also given in the following years. Please provide the evidence as document upload or as a URL link. Should you choose the latter option, please make sure that the links are active and comply with our 2-click policy, where the validator will be directed to the correct page within 2 clicks. In order for an evidence to be accepted, the evidence should contain information pertaining to the response and meet the indicator-specific requirement. Now, let's also talk about some do's and don'ts in terms of evidence. We strongly advise our participants to make use of the evidence cover page. As mentioned, our validator review all the evidence documents that are being uploaded. This is why, in order to ensure a seamless validation process, an evidence cover page can be very helpful. Participants should indicate how the evidence relates to the response, for example, by indicating how it supports the issues that have been selected. In the cases where participants are reporting group-level policies that have direct applicable effect on the entity, such relationships should also be clarified. Please note that this is the responsibility of the reporting entity to provide a clear and concise information that can be easily found and understood by the validator. If the answers are provided without clear evidence, the validator will reject them. Therefore, it is highly recommended to provide a summary of the evidence so that the validation team can find a selected issue easier. The evidence cover page can be found under the resources section on our website or in the appendix of our standard and reference guide. Regarding the language requirement, documents uploaded as supporting evidence do not need to be entirely translated into English. However, for evidence provided in languages other than English, A thorough summary to convey that the requirements have been met is definitely required for the validation purposes. Participants may make use of the open text box in order to provide a summary of the document. In addition, each selected issue must be identified within the document's upload by providing the page number and the exact location. For example, which paragraph, which clauses, which sentence, and which bullet number, etc. If the evidence is provided as a URL link, then the website does not need to be translated at all. As a general rule, the easier it is for a validator to confirm the evidence meeting the requirement, the better it is. Therefore, please be as specific as possible. You can find all the indicator-related requirement under each indicator in the validation section of our standard and reference guide. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us if there's any question. We're here to help you to report as smoothly as possible. After learning what should be done, let's not forget about what should be avoided when it comes to evidence. First and foremost, please only upload evidence that is relevant to the indicator. In other words, please do not upload evidence that apply to a complete different indicator or does not relate to the selected option at all. It is not necessary to translate the whole document into English, but a thorough summary of the relevant section will be sufficient. Again, translation is not needed if the evidence is provided as the form in a URL. One final note is that please do not upload evidence in a zip file, as we prefer to have PDFs. Apart from the do's and don'ts, we would like to also highlight a tool that might be especially useful for users who are reporting on multiple entities. Our templates tool provides an easy way for you to complete answer for the section of the assessment that are applicable across several entities. You can complete the template to the degree that is best suited for your organization. To use this function, please first log into the assessment portal and then click Manage Templates. New templates can be generated by creating a new one from scratch or based on a previously filled out assessment. Then the template will override an indicator response. Please note that indicators specific to the performance of the reporting entity's portfolio are not included in the template tool. The complete list of indicators that are included in the templates tool can be found on our website. Another very useful functionality available to all the participants is the pre-filling. Entities that previously participated in the assessment can have certain indicator pre-fill in this year's assessment as well. However, indicators that have been subject to change are not included in the pre-filling option. Therefore, participants are encouraged to review all the pre-fill responses and evidence before submitting the final response. The pre-fill evidence must be also applicable to the reporting year that are selected in indicator EC4. The complete list of indicators that are subject to pre-filling can be found on our website as well. One final note to the first-year participant is the grace period. Our grace period allows participants for a year to familiarize themselves with the GRESB reporting and assessment process. The name of the participating entity will still be visible under grace period, but our investor member will not be able to request access to see your result, benchmark report, and your GRESB score. First-year participants who wish to report under grace period can select this option as an entity-by-entity basis from the settings section in the assessment portal. Participants who have selected the grace period can also opt out from this after receiving your result. Please note that the grace period is not available in the second year of participation, regardless if you have used it or not in the first year. I hope this section is useful for your reporting process. Again, should you have any question, please do not hesitate to contact us, and I wish you a very smooth reporting journey.
Thank you, Jenny, for the very insightful tips and tricks for GRESB reporting. Hi, everyone. I'm Shweta, and I'm an analyst on the GRESB member success team with a focus on the infrastructure assessments. Now, I will be going over some questions submitted by participants and also some frequently asked questions for the 3 GRESB infrastructure assessments. I will start off with general questions that will apply to all the 3 assessments. Do I need to provide intent before I start my assessment? Yes. Participating entities must provide intent on the GRESB portal before starting their assessments every year. For participating assets or development assets, ensure that you select the correct assessment that the entity is participating in this year. Does GRESB prefer participants to report on calendar year or fiscal year? GRESB does not favor the use of calendar year over fiscal year or vice versa, as long as the chosen reporting year is used consistently throughout the assessment. Moreover, the data and documents provided as evidence must be applicable to the chosen reporting year, unless specified otherwise in the indicator. Why did I not receive a GRESB star rating last year? The GRESB star rating is an overall relative measure of ESG management and performance of the entity. The calculation of the GRESB rating is based on the GRESB score and its quintile position relative to the GRESB universe, with annual calibration of the model. If the participant is placed in the top quintile, it will be awarded a GRESB 5-star rating. If a participant is in the second quintile, it will be awarded a GRESB 4-star rating, and so on. And if a participant is ranked in the bottom quintile, it will receive a GRESB 1-star rate. GRESB star ratings are only awarded to participants that receive a GRESB score, which is the sum of two components. For the infrastructure asset assessment, this would be the sum of the management and performance component. For the infrastructure fund assessment, this would be the sum of the management and performance component, or the sum of the management and development component. For the development asset assessment, this would be the entire development module, as there are no individual components. How do I know which indicators are scored and the relevance level of the indicator on the assessment portal? On the assessment portal, when participants are editing their responses, they can see the score of the indicator in green on the top right corner. For indicators affected by materiality in the asset and the development asset assessment, the scores and relevance levels of materiality affected indicators will also be given on the top right of the indicator, but only after the entity and reporting characteristics section of the assessment has been completed. This is because the materiality of the entity is dependent on the responses from the entity and reporting characteristics section. Hence, any changes in this section might result in a change in the materiality of the entity. What are the main requirements for documents provided as evidence to be accepted? In general, there are three main requirements for evidences to be accepted. 1. Ensure that the documents satisfy the specific requirements for each indicator that it is uploaded for. Participants can find this information under the validation section of each indicator in the standard and reference guide. 2. The document must clearly state that it applies to the entity or is related to the entity in one way or another, in which case this relationship should be explained in the open text box. Finally, the documents must be valid for the reporting year that the entity has chosen in the entity and reporting characteristics section, unless explicitly mentioned otherwise in the indicator. Will there be any changes to the evidence accepted for the personnel ESG performance targets? In 2024, the section on non-financial consequences has been removed from the indicator LE6 for the asset assessment and LE5 for the fund assessment. The score for this indicator will now only depend on the selections made for the section on financial consequences. Hence, the requirements for the evidence for financial consequences will remain the same as last year. What type of documents are required for the risk management indicators? The type of documents required as evidence is detailed under each indicator under the validation section. For some indicators, especially within the risk management aspect, GRESB provides example templates that participants can use to submit their data. Moreover, good practice examples are also provided as links for certain indicators under the Alignment with External Framework section. How do I add new certifications for indicator CA1 for the asset and development asset assessments? If participants wish to add new certifications to the indicator CA1 in the asset or the development asset assessments, then they can fill out the certification evaluation form that they can find in the respective standard and reference guide. The completed form can be sent to the GRESB member success team at info@gresb.com or through the contact form on our website. GRESB will evaluate if the certification fulfills the 5 requirements stated in the standard and reference guide and will inform the participant about its decision. If accepted, the certification will be added to the drop-down list of indicator CA1 on the assessment portal. The last date to submit new certification schemes is June 21st, 2024. Now we will focus on assessment-specific questions, starting with the infrastructure fund assessment. How many components are there in the fund assessment in 2024? From 2024, the fund assessment can have 3 components, which is the management, performance, and development components. The performance and development component is not completed by the fund itself. Rather, the aggregated scores of the asset or the development asset that are linked to the fund will result in the performance or development component score for the fund. If a fund completes the management and performance components, it will receive the GRESB Infrastructure Fund Score and Benchmark Report. If a fund completes the management and development components, it will receive the GRESB Infrastructure Fund Development Score and Benchmark Report. Alternatively, funds can also just complete a management component if there are no assets linked to it. Can I exclude greenfield assets or assets in development in the 2024 assessment? Yes, funds can still exclude greenfield assets or assets in development, that are pre-operational from the 2024 fund assessment. Moreover, the other reasons for exclusions include assets being operational for less than 6 months, assets that are recently purchased, that are purchased and owned for less than 6 months, and finally, assets that were recently sold, that is sold in the first 6 months of the entity's reporting year. Next, we move on to questions from the infrastructure asset assessment. How do I change the materiality or material issues of my entity? GRESB assigns materiality to ESG issues and certain performance indicators based on the entity's characteristics. The materiality and scoring tool is very helpful for participants to understand how materiality works. This tool also contains the feedback form where participants can communicate to GRESB if or how the GRESB assigned materiality aligns or does not align with their self-assigned materiality. GRESB will evaluate the feedback from these forms, and if accepted, the changes will be reflected in the following GRESB cycle. What is the scoring weight for Scope 3 emissions in indicator GH1? In 2024, for the indicator GH1, the data coverage of Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions will also be scored. Reporting on Scope 3 emissions and its data coverage is neither compulsory nor scored. Hence, Scope 3 emissions have no scoring weight in GH1. Are the aspects implementation and output and impact scored? No. The aspects implementation and output and impact and the underlying indicators are not scored and are for reporting purposes only. How do I report if I do not have performance data for the entire reporting year for all my facilities? GRESB is seeking to standardize the scope and boundaries of reporting to follow for more accurate benchmarking and to progressively move towards scoring of performance. If the scope of the data reported for this indicator does not exactly match the entity reporting scope, which includes the facilities, ancillary activities, and time period, as reported in the entity and reporting characteristics, then the entity can highlight this in the exceptions text box. The lack of data could be temporal, that is, data missing for a month during the reporting year. It could be physical, that is, data missing for a facility that is covered in the reporting boundary. Or it could be operational, that is, data missing for activities that are not in the reporting boundary for the reporting entity. The exceptions text box is not scored and is for reporting purposes only. What are the scored fields in the tables provided in the performance indicators? The scored fields within the performance tables are always highlighted either in green or orange. The differences in the color applies to different sectors, which is explained in the scoring document. Some scored fields are automatically calculated and populated from the mandatory fields in the same table. But other scored fields such as reporting year target or future year target will have to be manually inputted. Finally, I will address questions for the newly released Infrastructure Development Asset Assessment. Is the Infrastructure Development Asset Assessment mandatory? Who should do the assessment? No, the Infrastructure Development Asset Assessment is not mandatory. The GRESB Infrastructure Development Asset Assessment is suitable for the evaluation of assets or group of assets in the construction or pre-construction phase. The assessment could be taken by investors, fund managers, infrastructure companies, asset operators, developers, and EPCs. Funds can still exclude assets from reporting in 2022 if they are in development, that are pre-operation. Does the grace period apply for entities participating in the development asset assessment? First-year participants can submit the assessment without providing GRESB investor members with the ability to request access to their results. This is referred to as a grace period. This also applies to the development asset assessment. If an entity that was reporting on the development asset assessment becomes operational at some point in the future and then starts the asset assessment, it can also use the grace period in its first year for the asset assessment too. What is dynamic materiality and phase-based materiality? After the materiality outcomes of any individual entity are known, which occurs after the entity and reporting characteristics section is completed, the scores are then redistributed proportionally across all remaining scored indicators in the assessment, ensuring that the evaluation of a project's sustainability is contextually nuanced and reflective of the project's unique circumstances at any given point in its development life cycle. This is known as dynamic materiality. Indicators relating to construction-related activities are weighted based on relevance such that the indicator is assigned 1. Medium relevance, that is, weighted moderately if the asset has reported to be in the construction phase, Or 2, no relevance, that is not scored if the asset has reported to be in the pre-construction phase. This is known as phase-based materiality and only affects indicators RP 2.1, RM 3.1, RM 3.2, MA1, and HS3 in the Infrastructure Development Asset Assessment. If you have more questions, you can write to the Member Success team through the contact form on our website or by sending an email to info@gresb.com. We hope you found this webinar useful and we wish you the best for the 2024 GRESB reporting cycle. Thank you.